Should we get to our main event story today? Because this is it'll cheer me up. That's why I saved it for last, folks, because I needed to be cheered up after the chaos of the political and geopolitical strata over the weekend. Vince Russo has stooged himself off again. This was a video from his podcast, right?
Yes, it was his podcast, and they do, I guess, a video version of it so you could actually see the people talking.
Because I saw much of it. I couldn't take listening to that fucking voice or looking at that goddamn brown puckered sphincter of a fucking face for like 17 minutes that it was. So I watched some of it, and then I was going to go back to it, and by that time it had been taken down because he'd realized what he'd done. But basically, for the folks who don't know, Vince Russo, on his podcast with that and Disco Inferno, he's harmless. As I've said before, as long as he never actually was given a booking job somewhere and allowed to do the stupid ideas and stupid things that he comes up with as relates to wrestling, the Invisible Man and building, the evil architect and whatever. He's gotten a job for the past 10 or 15 years because he's from New York, and Russo likes to have his own kind around him and likes, Disco's tomfoolery. Amuses him, and they hired him as an agent one time in TNA, and none of the boys fucking respected him, and they used to fuck with him unmercifully, but he was there as he was like Cheetah in the Tarzan movies. But even Disco Inferno, under those parameters, on this program that Vince Russo does allegedly for somebody, I'm not going to plug it, nobody should watch it or listen to it, but if Disco's a co-host or whatever, and he's on there, and Russo came out and told people, admitted from his own two fucking measly little lips, that not only when TNA was on Destination America, he had contacted the Destination America, the network behind Dixie Carter's back, and told them, well, you've been sold a bill of goods, and this program you're getting is not what you're thinking you're going to get, and you need me to tell you how to do it right and straighten it out for you. And he was basically trying to suck somebody's dick for a job, which is probably the job he's going to end up with shortly when he keeps stooging himself. And then he did the same thing to Pop TV. He's done the same thing at Brad Schwartz at Pop TV. He got a hold of him and said, hey, you've been sold a bill of goods. This program's crummy. I'm the only one who can fix it. You need to hire me as a consultant, so I'll help you out. Trying to basically tell the networks that are carrying if you can call Pop TV a network at this point, but trying to tell the platforms that TNA has left available to them to stay on the air that this program's a shits, nobody's going to watch it, you've been sold a bill of goods. That was a quote. You've been sold a bill of goods, and the only way to fix it is if you hire me, not thinking that they may just say, well, fuck, now that this guy's told us we just got conned by this fucking lying douchebag twat Dixie Carter and a bunch of these other wrestling carnies, why don't we just cancel the whole thing and everybody'd be out of a job? He didn't care about that. All he wanted to do was go behind somebody's back and get a job. And I hate to say, Brian, you know how bad I hate to say I told you so.
You do?
Every time I say I told you so, I preface it by saying I hate to say this. So you know it's true. But people, I told you so. He's a fucking lying, backstabbing, nut-cutting, jock-sniffing, conniving motherfucker that doesn't give a fuck about anybody but himself, much like Donald Trump. Because in his little fucking pea brain, in that dehydrated BB that he calls a functioning fucking brain, Vince Russo still thinks, despite all evidence to the contrary, he still thinks that he knows the first fucking thing, that he can spell cat if you spot him the C and the A as it comes to professional wrestling. He had a momentary bit of success due to as much as a billionaire's fucking desperation and complete accident, and also tripping over the two biggest stars in the modern history of the business. And he has traded on that for 20 years by lying, by conniving, by going behind people's backs. And we're gonna sketch that whole thing out for you, as a matter of fact. Because at first manifested itself when he went down there and was fighting with after he gave notice to Vince McMahon by calling him on the phone when Vince had just landed from a European tour and was at the Meadowlands, despite the fact that that was 30 miles from where Vince Russo lived, and he could have easily hopped in his car, and in an hour he could have been standing and looking Vince McMahon in the face and saying, I'm taking a better offer in WCW. Here's my hand, Vince. Thank you for getting me started in the business, and I owe everything to you, because he did. He was running a fucking secondhand goddamn video store before Vince McMahon had a momentary lapse of insanity and hired him. Instead of doing that, he called him on the phone and gave him his notice. And I don't think Vince McMahon, he may not have seen him again to this day in person. That was the kind of stand-up guy he was. Then he goes down to Turner Broadcasting, where he'd sold them a bill of goods, just like Bischoff did, to fucking get the job that he had at that time. He said, I'm responsible for the Attitude Era. It was all me. It wasn't Steve Austin. It wasn't The Rock. It wasn't Jim Ross, the greatest announcer of all time. It wasn't a network quality television production facility. It was all me and this fucking stooge named Ed Ferrara, this fat, dumpy, pasty-faced fuck that carries my papers around. We're the ones. So they gave him an incredible amount of money to come down there and save their fucking sinking ship until, I don't even know if the first time was 6 months, they realized, oh shit, this guy don't know what the fuck he's doing. And think about when WCW under Turner Broadcasting and Eric Bischoff at that time said, oh my fucking God, this guy don't know what the fuck he's doing. Imagine how fucking incompetent that guy must have been. And they sent him home, and then he came back and tried to work with Bischoff, and then he went home again, and then he said he had a concussion, and he took his ball and went home because he was in the ring. This fucking buggy-whipped arm, bug-eyed, non-athletic fuck was in the ring trying to, on a national television show, trying to play wrestler and doing it badly. Out of the 2 or 2.5 years that he spent in WCW until they sent him home for the final time and closed down shortly thereafter, he closed down a fucking billionaire's wrestling company. He wasn't in charge half of the time, and he blamed standards and practices, and he blamed this guy, and he blamed that guy, and only if they'd seen my true vision, and only if they'd seen my true brilliance, right? So that was his fucking success in WCW. And then after WCW goes out of business and is sold to Vince McMahon after losing $60 million in the last year of their existence, and sold to Vince McMahon for basically pennies on the dollar, where does Vince Russo end up? Jerry Jarrett starts a company with his son out of Nashville, had original investors. The investors at the time looked good, but unfortunately they got in some problems with their own business. It was Health South. Everybody's heard that story. But Jeff Jarrett, unfortunately, the one mistake that the Jarrett family made, or Jeff at least, was trusting this fucking conniving shit. And he's the one, Vince Russo's the one, everybody knows this story is true, that named TNA Wrestling. And Jerry Jarrett, he lied to Jerry Jarrett and said, oh, it's total nonstop action. And Jerry was not sold on the fucking name, but of course Russo admitted later on, I just told him that because he would have never gone for it. It was really TNA, because in his fucking adolescent, never fucked another fucking female but his childhood sweetheart, who he's still married to, fucking arrested sexual fucking life. That was a fucking funny thing. Oh, let's make it TNA Wrestling. That'll get all the fucking people that watch the Jerry Springer show, like me and my fucking butt buddy Ed Ferrara that carries my papers around. We consider that highbrow entertainment. That's the fucking opera, the Jerry Springer show. All wrestling fans want to see is trash. We want to appeal to the lowest common denominator. So he named a company TNA Wrestling. And believe me, it wasn't lost on people outside the wrestling bubble. I remember when I promoted one of their first live events here in Louisville, Kentucky, I had to go to the cable company, and I had to go to the television companies. I had to go to the radio stations and say, yes, I'm working for, and I would say it very slowly, TNA Wrestling. But still they go, oh, TNA Wrestling, and roll their fucking eyes. So this fucking little adolescent fucking jock-sniffing wannabe fucking wrestler who thought he was a goddamn genius doomed them with a bad name that people wouldn't take seriously. The creative was suspect for the first couple of years when they got sideways with Hell South because they had their legal issues and couldn't put any more money in it. They found Dixie Carter. They found an angel, as my old friend Burt Prentice would say. And he went right to work on Dixie Carter. Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. Oh, I'm the greatest. Oh, it's just that everybody else there's a problem. Everybody else, they're holding me back. Everybody else. And they fired him once. They let him go, fired him. I don't know what the fuck. I wasn't there then. The reason why I went to TNA originally was because I thought it was a Russo free zone because they'd already made that experiment and saw that it didn't work. And he had midgets beaten off in garbage cans and dancers in cages. Vince Russo was responsible for Jeff and Jerry Jarrett not speaking to each other for years because of the ill feelings, because of Vince Russo being involved in that when Jerry Jarrett was trying to start a wrestling company and his quote in one of his books was reading a television format written by Vince Russo was like reading something written by a man on LSD. And Jeff, unfortunately, and we'll talk about this, folks, he came to find out, but he didn't know then Russo's true colors. So as a result of Jeff still trying to follow the sports entertainment thing that Russo wanted to put together, Jerry and Jeff didn't speak for years. He tore a family apart because of his backstabbing and whispering in people's ears and telling people things behind other people's backs. So he did that, but he was in Dixie Carter's ear. And then he was gone, but then he was always in her ear because then, see, here's the thing. This fucking guy, even though he says he graduated fucking college, and by the way, Russo, I know you're going to listen to this because you listen to everything that everybody says about you. You've blocked me on Twitter. I don't have your fucking phone number, but I just want you to know when you listen to this motherfucker, you know I'm telling the God's honest truth. You're God, the one you believe in. I don't, but I'm not a liar like you are. I don't suck up to people to get a job. If they don't want to fucking hire me on my merits, they can go piss up a rope. So I'm telling the truth because I got nothing to lose. And if you got anything to say to me, you call me. You know people that have my fucking number, you piece of shit. So here's what happens next. I think it's a Russo free zone, but he's still in Dixie Carter's ear because he knows nothing else. He can't do anything else. He went to college over in Evansville, Indiana for journalism, and he can't fucking spell, and he was a goddamn embarrassment when we used to read the TV formats in the TNA production meetings, and the Spike TV representative would be sitting there. I knew he was going back to the UFC folks and the people at Spike going, yeah, this fucking idiot that fucking writes the wrestling show, he can't even spell. He doesn't even know the right words to use. It's a goddamn joke. So anyway, he's still in Dixie's ear. So I come in to work with Dutch Mantell and Jeff Jarrett in 2006. And a couple months later, Dutch Mantell calls me and says, well, we fired a couple people off the creative team. I think Scott D'Amore was one. Maybe somebody else, I can't remember, but we hired somebody new. I said, who's that? Vince Russo. And I was dumbfounded. I said, why the fuck, what the fuck can you explain this to me? And I will say to Dutch Mantell's credit, he's one of the funniest and the smartest men I've ever met in professional wrestling. And for 3 years on a weekly basis, I would ask him, why is this motherfucker here? Why is his presence tolerated? Why is anybody listening to him? He could never give me a fucking answer because he didn't know either. But so I tried to give my notice because I didn't want to be, I knew it was going to be a situation. I didn't want to be a detriment to business. I said, hey, when you guys smarten up and fucking fire him, then call me back. Let Abyss give me the black hole slam. Jeff wouldn't accept my notice. He said, nope, if you don't come, you're not showing up. We're not going to take it. We're not going to take your resignation. You don't have to deal with Russo. Dutch is your producer. You go on, blah, blah, blah. So there's a little email. And I said, fine. I said, I tried to give my notice. I don't want it to get in the way of business. You know how I feel about this guy, but I will do my best for you, Jeff. If you want me to be here, I will do my best for you. I will perform my best. I will do my best for the company. As a matter of fact, it was 4 months later, Jeff asked me to be not only an on-air talent as commissioner, but also an agent to help work in the TV truck and tell like Keith Mitchell, the producer, and Dave Sahadi or Timmy Walbert, the directors, what was going on so they didn't miss any shots, especially on the live pay-per-views, and lay out matches for the guys, especially the ex-WWF talent that might want to work with someone that had a little bit more experience than a few of the other agents that they had. And I accepted that job because I wanted to help the company. And I never had any fucking confrontations with Russo. I didn't speak to him for the first 3 months. I didn't have any confrontations with him. I didn't cause any problems. I said, okay, I will help do what I can for the company. What did Vince Russo do? What did he think in his mind? There was a lawsuit that Conan brought against TNA Wrestling, and one of the emails was discovery in that lawsuit was pertaining to me. And Brian, I sent it to you because I wanted you to see it. Instead of me just reading this shit and everybody thinks it's me, you can vouch for the fact that this is a legitimate email that was found in discovery in the lawsuit that was sent by Vince Russo to Dixie Carter. Can you not?
I can verify that's exactly what it is.
Can you read that email now?
I can. I believe this came up because David Bixenspan, my partner on 605, was doing an article about this and uncovered this. It's about Conan's discrimination lawsuit against TNA. I believe in that lawsuit he also accused Terry Taylor of causing his kidney failure by giving him pills. But anyway, here is the letter. I'll read it verbatim as best as I can. It is from October 12th, 2006.
About 3 or 5, I would say, no, it's about a month after they hired Russo back.
Dixie, there are 2 things I want to pass along to you regarding a conversation I had this morning. A good friend of mine that I worked with at the WWF for 4 years, called me today. His name is Matt Miller, and he now runs the Gund Arena in Cleveland. Matt told me that a couple of weeks ago he caught part of our show after watching the UFC. He said that he felt we were sending out mixed messages, that the pieces didn't seem to fit. He said on one hand he saw Conan's group, LAX, that came across as cool, hip, and cutting edge. And moments later, he saw Jim Cornette on the same show that came across as a southern 1980s wrestling cartoon. Dixie, these were his exact words. I agree wholeheartedly with this and tried to tiptoe around it with Jeff, and he got defensive and mad at me. Right now, in Samoa Joe and Kurt, we have 2 wrestlers about as real as can be, the closest to UFC that you're going to get. Then on the other hand, we have your Cornettes and your Jeffs, to some extent.
Yeah, to some extent in parentheses. Yeah.
That are about as old school wrestling as you get. It seems that in 42 minutes, we have 2 different brands, 2 different types of entertainment. My thing with Cornette isn't personal. I swear to you. And that's in caps. That's why I said swear like that.
Yeah.
But I'm just having a huge problem with him representing TNA management, wearing a canary yellow sports jacket when we go into prime time. Again, Dixie, being hip is the key. Joe is cool. Angle is cool. LAX, you have guys like Truth and Hoyt, and then we shot ourselves in the foot when we go back 20 years. Again, I just wanted to make note of this. To be honest, if I was writing TV, a character like Jim Cornette would not be representing TNA management. I would rather go with an attractive, sexy female executive like a Tina Fey that would add a whole new dimension to the product. Just my 2 cents. Business. Matt also told me that the owners of the Cleveland Cavaliers own a company called Fatheads. What they make is huge decals of athletes that you could stick on your wall. They tried to strike a deal with the WWF and were turned down. This might be worth our while to go after, as I think it would be a good thing to get our licensing department on. If they want any more info, they can call me. I hope you're having a good day. Peace, Vince.
Number 1. Matt Miller, I know Matt Miller very well. Matt Miller was a friend of mine, also worked with him at the same time in the WWF, and he was a very nice guy, and he never seemed to have a problem with me, and I don't know whether Matt Miller said that or whether Vince just needed to come up with somebody else that said these things so he could agree with them rather than it coming from him, since obviously he had nothing personal against me. But you see, he started a month after they hired him back. Jeff Jarrett at that time was still a minority owner of TNA, and he is going to Dixie, telling Dixie that Jeff, the only reason that Russo got involved with the company to begin with, Jeff Jarrett, was Southern wrestling. And then he tried to walk it back a little bit by saying to some extent. He tried to walk it back. But me, he wasn't going to walk back. By the way, do you remember ever seeing me wearing a canary yellow suit in TNA?
I don't actually, no.
No, because I didn't. because here fuckwad wasn't even paying attention to what was going on his own show, on the show that for the company he was working for. Dutch Mantell is the one who decided that I was going to be, actually, he wanted to call me the wrestling czar, but I was either, I can't remember whether I was director of authority or voice of management or whatever the fuck. It was the old commissioner thing, the old commissioner ploy. But I was wearing double-breasted suits that matched and was the only one in the whole company, and maybe the only one in the whole business with the verbal ability, as was tested and proven many times, as Dutch and Jeff would actually come to me and say, you got to explain this. You're the only one's going to be able to get these rules out or these stipulations or explain what the fuck. I was racking my brain trying to go out there and explain the foolishness and the nonsense and the verbal effluvia that Vince Russo was writing that nobody would understand, and I had to go out and make sense out of it, and I was dressed, I thought, quite well. I looked to myself when I looked in the mirror like a paragon of sartorial resplendency. I bought nice suits. Everything matched. I wasn't carrying a tennis racket. I was the voice of the promotion. And unfortunately, the voice of the promotion is the one that had to explain the bullshit that Vince Russo was foisting off on the viewers. Then he would, instead of me doing that, can you name, Tina Fey, by the way, was not available. Not for those wages, at least. Can you imagine a woman that was going to be able to explain any of that horse shit? Can you imagine, I at one point not only had to explain all the horse shit that he was writing, but also there was at one point, I know some of the 3 or 4 TNA fans might remember, that the production crew was ready to riot because he came into the production meeting wanting to have a brawl involving 32 members of the roster fighting simultaneously in 3 different places, inside the impact zone, in the locker room area, and out in catering, and wanted it shot live to tape. And I was the one they came to and was able to produce that because I spent 4 hours that afternoon placing everybody, placing the furniture, placing the toys, and walking everybody through it, not only from the wrestling side, but also from the camera side. I gave the best effort that I could give to try to mitigate the damage that he was doing to that lying cunt Dixie Carter's fucking company by trying to at least bring it back up to even, because I figured if I do the best I can, then maybe, just maybe, I can mitigate the damage he's doing and we can at least break even on the thing. Of course, I was overestimating my fucking capabilities because I wasn't even that good. But already a month after that they hired him back, he was sending emails like that, knocking me personally, knocking Jeff behind his back. I remember another time that Dutch Mantell mentioned that he was at Jeff's house and he and Vince and Jeff were writing the show. And Dutch was out of the room, and this was right after he come back, and he couldn't hear exactly what was going on, but he heard a few little choice things because Russo was whining and griping and squealing like a pig under a gate that I hated him and he didn't know what was going to happen. And I've told him in the past I was going to punch him in the face. And Jeff Jarrett's words loud and clear rang out, "God damn it, Vince. If you're so fucking worried about it, why don't you go ahead and have the fight with him and be a man and see what happens?" And he wouldn't fucking do it because he's a gutless prick. He's a gutless, backstabbing prick. So what did he do then? He waited 3 years. He waited until Jeff got sideways with Dixie, and Dixie sent Jeff home and removed him from power. And then he saw his chance to whisper in the ear of that delicate little Southern flower that had wasted about $50 million at that point of her father's money. And he systematically got everybody that Jeff had brought in to run the wrestling side of the equation, except himself, out. First, Savio Vega was fired as an agent. Then Road Dogg, Brian Armstrong, Brian James was fired as an agent. Then finally, Dutch Mantell, who not only had 40 years experience in professional wrestling, but had more talent for wrestling in his little finger than Vince Russo has ever had in his giant bloated fucking body with that basketball-sized head on top of that fucking pea-sized fucking neck. But also, Dutch Mantell is the one As Vince Russo said, we have Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle that are real as real can be. That's the UFC. Vince Russo never watched a bit of the UFC. Russo plays fantasy baseball like he lives in a fantasy world. It was Dutch Mantell, the one that wrote the TVs, that was the lead up to the biggest pay-per-view that they ever did, which was Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle in that semi-shoot fight. It was Dutch Mantell that made the decision that they wouldn't do angles every week, that they would just train and talk about each other so people would have to pay to see them touch. And as a result, TNA Wrestling did 40-some thousand pay-per-view buys for that pay-per-view, the most they'd ever done, and they never approached it again because Russo saw that success and figured, oh shit, I didn't have anything to do with this. So I better start booking these fucking guys because elsewise if they do it again and I don't have anything to do with it, even Dixie, as stupid as she is, will see through it. So that's when he took over fucking taking care of them. And as a result, they never achieved that success again because all he did was his phony angles every week. When the knockouts became the highest rated segment of the show, it had been girl wrestling that Vince Russo didn't want anything to do with. So Dutch Mantell, building around Gail Kim, a classic Ricky Morton babyface, and Awesome Kong, a classic Abdullah the Butcher style heel, built the knockouts division into where it was doing better ratings than the men that Russo was writing. So then Russo takes over with the beautiful people and blah, 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 and gimmicked the knockouts up and just made them part of the roster again, and they lost their success. And then finally, when Jeff was sent home, and then he got rid of Savio, and he got rid of Road Dogg, and then finally he got rid of Dutch, then I was the last one to go. Because allegedly, I had blown up at Vince Russo in a production meeting. Now, let me tell you folks something, and I'm pretty sure you know when I'm telling the truth. If I had screamed and yelled at Vince Russo and cussed him out, don't you think I would be saying that? Don't you think I would be broadcasting that from the highest rooftop in the land? What happened was he booked a stupid match between Sting and Hernandez, supposed to be Super Mech, supposed to be Dixie's Latino superstar, both of them baby faces. Sting 20 years older and a fucking 60 pounds lighter. And Sting was supposed to have broken ribs from a previous attack on the show. And then they were going to have this match with each other on TV, and a bunch of people were going to run in. They were going to fight him off together, and then Sting was going to roll Hernandez up from behind and beat him. So the 50-year-old man with the broken ribs was going to beat the Latino superstar that everybody knows you don't beat the Latino superstars because their people lose faith in them. And besides that, it was preposterous. And besides that, it would turn the Sting heel. And then he was going to have Eric Young come down and lay both of them out with a baseball bat and stand there and cut a promo over them, even though neither Eric Young nor most of the people that were going to run in were even on the next pay-per-view, but Sting and Hernandez were both on the next pay-per-view in very prominent matches. And in the production meeting, privately, I said, what the fuck? Because the one time since 1999 that Vince Russo has called me on the phone, he had called me on my way down to Florida. And he had told me that this match he had was going to take place like that. And I said, Vince, that's insane for all the reasons I just mentioned. You can't do that. It'll bury everybody. Let them fight the opposing forces off together and do a DQ and get out of it. A DQ may not be preferable, but we're in it now because you shouldn't have the match to begin with. And he said, okay, you're right. And as soon as we got to the production meeting, he had changed that back to the original thing. So with Terry Taylor there, and with Taz there, and with Mike Tenay there, and with everybody else that was in the office at the time, we argued it out, and I prevailed because my way made sense and didn't destroy the careers of their top stars. And then I went out as the agent and executed that. I didn't go into business for myself. We got the okay first. Then, just a few weeks later, I get a call from Terry Taylor announcing that my services are no longer required, along with Dutch's, along with Savio's, along with Road Dogg's, along with every other fucking enemy that he had. The only people that remained were Matt Conway, who was some stooge that had worked in production that Dixie put on the creative team because they wouldn't tell her what was going on, and so she wanted somebody to fucking spy for her, and Russo, and he was about to bring in Ed Ferrara. who I had told what I thought of him years ago and who wouldn't coexist with me, so he had to figure out a way to get me out of the way. So he cut my nuts off behind my back to Dixie and Terry Taylor, because Terry, my old friend, I never hated him. He flunked a Stooge test when I sent an email to him about Russo, but he had no balls, and he was a Christian buddy of Russo's, and they rode in the car together. Have you ever noticed these Christian buddies? They don't mind lying behind people's backs. Terry Taylor took up for him and called me and said, fine, your services are no longer required. Then the next day, I read on the internet that it's announced in the Sun newspaper that I was fired for being unprofessional, for having a blow up and in the production meeting and screaming, why are we pushing Eric Young? Which was nonsense and had to come from somebody in that room. And it was a preemptive strike by that piece of shit lying sack of snake feces Vince Russo to make him look like the babyface. I had to do something wrong. And people would think, they would believe readily that I would scream at Vince Russo, even though I hadn't. So I asked Terry Taylor, my old bosom buddy, for a retraction since he knew that it didn't happen. And he said that he was sure that Dixie would have no problem with that. And the next day, there was a retraction. The same unnamed source that said I did it also said I didn't do it. Not from Dixie Carter, not from anybody that was attributable in the company, but an unnamed source, which is why that I've been telling people what a lying sack of shit, whore, cunt, douchebag Dixie Carter's been ever since, because she lied to me to my face on the phone and told me it didn't have anything to do with Russo. It was just a difference in philosophy, and we'd work together sometime again down the road. Yeah, I'd want some more of that. It was so enjoyable the first time around. And I've also tried to tell everybody what Vince Russo's really like. But unfortunately, even though most everybody now knows, since he has had not one lick of success in the fucking wrestling industry since his accidental Attitude Era 20 years ago, he still perpetuates this myth that he could say suey if the hogs had him about professional wrestling. And the only one now that believes him is that fucking douchebag Dixie Carter, because even after they brought in Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff, by the way, how much success has TNA Wrestling had since the summer of 2009 after Jeff Jarrett left and I left and Dutch Mantell left? Things have pretty much gone downhill. They've had every big name from Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff on down, and their ratings have gotten worse, and their television networks have plummeted from Spike to fucking Destination America to fucking Pop TV. Their talent roster has been depleted. Her parents cut her off, Brian, cut off her allowance, the little delicate southern flower, so she don't have the money to play wrestling promoter anymore. She's Ann Gunkel in the dying days of the Georgia War. So they bring in Bischoff and Hogan, who hate Vince Russo just as much as most everybody. There's been lawsuits between them before, and Russo loses his power, so he goes home. But he knew that Bischoff and Hogan were just drying the fucking clueless twat out, hanging her up and draining her blood, and he knew that she would need something sooner or later. So he waited, and when finally she realized that she had been butt-fucked by Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff without even any lube, she started talking to Vince Russo again. And he became a consultant to her. But you see, here's the problem. See, he's so toxic, his presence is so poisonous, his reputation is so bad, and everybody who's ever worked with him, if they'll admit it publicly, knows what the fuck he's like, that she couldn't even bring him back in front of people. So he was a consultant in secret. And then you remember this, Brian. Who stooged on him? He did. He sent an email not to Mike Tenay telling him how to do some commentary, but to Mike Johnson of PW Insider, who they had denied and lied to, like they'd lied to everybody else, said, no, Vince Russo doesn't have anything to do with our company, and that proved it did. And Mike Johnson asked for a comment, and they lied to him again, and he got mad because they lied to him, so he printed it. And guess who else didn't want Vince Russo involved in the company? Spike TV, who already wasn't happy with the ratings that they weren't getting anymore from that half-ass outlaw program. And they had told the Spike TV representative specifically when they asked, no, Vince Russo doesn't have anything to do with our company. So not only did they find out by reading the internet that a company that they had been helping to financially support, that they had been kicking in money for to pay the big contracts of all these big stars that they'd brought in to diminishing returns and falling ratings. But then the douchebag owner of the company had lied to them about it, and it wasn't a program that they needed to keep to begin with, so they canceled their ass. And she still didn't fucking learn. Of course, she had to distance herself from him at that point, right? She had to distance herself, but I understand they've still talked a time or two, and she still won't come out and knock him publicly. So then she fell from Spike TV to Destination America. And that didn't work out because this fucking backstabbing, no good cunt, Vince Russo, was calling up Destination America going, well, you got sold a bill of goods. I'm the one, and they don't know anything about wrestling. Obviously, they wouldn't have put TNA on in the first place if they did. But they probably figured, well, this guy, he's worked for all these big companies. He must know what he's talking about. We don't want to hire him as a consultant. We'll just get him. He probably got them bounced off Destination America. Don't you think that happened suspiciously quickly, that they exercised the out clause in their contract so quickly? And then they go to Pop TV, which was recently rebranded from the TV Guide channel and probably has about as many viewers as C-SPAN, and he does the same fucking thing. Here's the loyalty of that no good piece of fucking shit, that the only person that has even wanted to or tried to employ him in the wrestling business in the past 15 years, the only one that would listen to his horse shit, the only one who would put up with his presence, the only one who would spend millions of dollars of her father and mother's money in a losing effort just because he put them in a hole so bad like George W. Bush did this country that they could never recover. He went behind her back too. Because that's the kind of guy that he is. And Jeff Jarrett finally found out, because once that he was gone, he found out that Vince was knocking him too, which is why Vince Russo, he's already tried to get a job with Lucha Underground, because I mentioned he doesn't know anything else to do except running bad fucking B-movie fucking video stores, and those are not exactly, might as well run a buggy whip factory these days than run a video store. So now he tried to get on with Lucha Underground. They were smart enough not to take him. Tried to get on with Destination America. They were smart enough not to take him. Tried to get on with even Pop TV wouldn't take him. Pop fucking TV. You might as well be showing slides on the wall of a barn in Wartburg, Tennessee as being on Pop TV, and they wouldn't take him. He's fucking toxic. He's poisonous. And now, once again, he's stooged himself. He's the only guy in the world that ever quit from his own website, if you remember that from about a year ago, because the fucking guy that he got into the website business with, he fucked that guy and forgot to get all his passwords first. He was telling people not to buy his own merchandise off of his own website. It's the only time in the world I've ever agreed with Vince Russo was when he told people not to buy his merchandise. He's a complete fucking idiot. If brains were gasoline, he couldn't propel a Flea's motorcycle around a raindrop. If you took Vince Russo's brain and you bowled it toward a drinking straw, it would look like you were rolling a kernel of corn into a storm drain. So now, maybe everybody will realize, and by the way, the video of the podcast where he announced he stooged himself that he had done this, as soon as everybody realized what he'd done, including himself, and it was up on all the sites, he took it down. Sorry, this video does not exist, because even he in his minuscule little fucking vapid brain realized that he had made himself once again look like the fucking idiot and the conniving backstabber that he is. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to say I told you so, but I've been saying this for 20 years, and now more than ever, people understand and people know. And thank you, Vince Russo. I've never said those words before, but thank you from the bottom of my pea-picking little heart, because you yourself, Vince Russo, are the one that has proved what I've been saying all along. You're a piece of shit. You're a liar. You're a con man. You're a backstabber, and you cut people's nuts off behind their back instead of looking them straight in the face. And the words that I said, and I will close the program with this, the words that I said to Jim Ross in 1999, When I left Stamford, Connecticut, and I came to Louisville to oversee OVW, I told Jim Ross in his office at Titan Tower, I said, JR, I certainly hope that Vince McMahon likes this idea that we have for taking the developmental property to OVW. I think I can do a good job with it. I'm excited about the prospects because we didn't know whether or not Vince was going to do it. I said, but I just want you to know, just from me to you, because we've been friends for, at that time, 15 years. If I leave this town without a job with the WWF, I'm going to hospitalize Vince Russo my last day here. And he, oh, corny, don't do that. I said, no, I've had enough. I can't stand his existence in the world anymore, and I'm going to do something about it. And fortunately for him, I left with a job. And then it was in TNA when he pulled that little deal. I was right there in front of him. As a matter of fact, I told Jeff Jarrett, this is the only heat I ever had with Jeff Jarrett. I told Jeff Jarrett, I said, good rib. Because for 3 years we've coexisted, and I've said hello, Vince, in the production meetings, but we've never had a casual conversation, and I still feel the same way, but I was willing to be professional and work with the guy. But finally, when Jeff was gone and Dutch was gone and Savio was gone and Road Dogg was gone, Jeff Jarrett called me one day on the phone. He said, please, basically take care of my business. He said, you're the last one left. You know he'll go too far. I said, and why'd you have anything to do with hiring him in the first place, Jeff? And he couldn't give me an answer. But he said, just try to keep him from going too far, work with the boys, because I always have to get with the boys and get them to do the stupid shit he wanted them to do. So then I'd have to change it around to where it'd be something that they would do and then go to Jeff and get it approved. So Jeff says, take care of my business, Jim. And I said, all right, I will. And in the spirit of that, before that production meeting happened where we had that little discussion, I took Vince Russo around the corner in Universal Studios back there in the offices, and I stuck my hand out. I said, I know we've had our business. We're never going to agree about wrestling, but the team is in need, and we're the only two now that are going to be able to work together. I'll keep the boys on the right path, and you try to fucking do whatever the fuck it is you do. I didn't say that. I was nice. And I shook his fucking hand. Shook his fucking hand. It was a 3-year rib by Jeff Jarrett just to get me to shake his fucking hand. And then 2 weeks later, of course, I'm out. But I was out on the phone. I wasn't anywhere around him. And I haven't been within 1,000 miles, as far as I know, of Vince Russo since then. And as a matter of fact, WrestleCade this year in Winston-Salem, I've been the guest general manager and appeared at the convention. I'm not going to be doing that this year. I had a standing invitation from the promoters, Tim Woody and Tracy Myers, and they do a great show, and I recommend everybody go. But I won't be there this year because one of the vendors is bringing Vince Russo in. And I had promised Stacy a long time ago and promised myself that I would never be in the same place as him ever again, because I know how I get. And I know that one of us would go to jail and the other one would go to the hospital. And I believe I know which is which. And I don't want to be paying any lawyers. So I'm not going to be there at WrestleCade this year, specifically because I'm trying to be the bigger man and not get in fucking issues. But now that he has come out and told everybody, told the world what a piece of shit he is, I am just congratulating myself that once again I've known all along, and for 20 years what I've been saying is true. And Vince Russo, let me tell you something. And if you want to, you can call the fucking FBI, because I sent Terry Taylor an email about him one time, and Terry Taylor immediately forwarded it right to Russo. And I didn't say I was going to murder him, but I said I sure would like to, that I have dreams about doing it. And they sent me a letter from their lawyers. It was, by the way, it was an entertainment lawyer. God never even fucking tried a real fucking criminal case. Couldn't got a sodomy charge reduced to tailgating with some entertainment lawyer. But they said, you violated a confidentiality contract, and I've still framed this part, and Vince Russo's in mortal fear of you. Well, Russo, you better be in mortal fear of me, son, because I'm old and I'm broke down and I don't know if I can whip anybody anymore. But I swear to fucking God in heaven, if there was one, that the next time that I see you anywhere in person, I will pick up whatever blunt instrument is handy, and I will do what I've been wanting to do for 20 years, and that's cave your miserable fucking skull in and do the world a favor. So I'm being the bigger man at WrestleCade, and I'm pulling out, and I ain't going to be there, because he even told the guy was trying to book him. He said, Cornette's going to be there, and I'm scared of Cornette. Well, you don't have to worry about it, Vince. I'm giving you a free pass. But, son, the next turn's up to you, because the next time I'm not going to cost myself and my family money again. I'm not going to pull out of another one. Next time it's your turn to pull out. Or else, that's what your father should have done, by the way, son. Or you can just come on, being the pussy that you are, you can come on and your knees can knock together like Jose Greco's backup band, and you and me will be in the same place sometime again, and we'll see what fucking happens. And if I've been to jail before, you never have, because you told me yourself 20 years ago you'd never been in a fucking fight in your life. I've had people wanted to kill me on top of me, and I'm still standing here. So let's see what two old, broke-down, middle-aged white fucks can do. It might look like Kimbo Slice and Dot of 5,000, but no, one of these days, Vince, it's going to come down to it, and everybody wants to know what's going to happen, and I sure do. I know you don't. But in the meantime, I can take pleasure and privilege in the fact that everything I've ever said about you was true, and it's been proven from your own two measly, lying little lips. And for that, I think that's about time to end the show today. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've had as much fun as I have over the last couple minutes. We will be back next week with another experience. Until then, for our producer, Styles Bitchley, for my co-host, the great Brian Last, and for that piece of shit Vince Russo that I hope is somewhere in Colorado preparing to hang himself in his fucking closet, I bid you a good day.